Hamilton Mayor Andrea Horwath announced late last week that she'll be on a, well, they call it an economic development trip to Italy, which has got some people questioning, just how necessary something like this is, given some of the tough economic times that the city itself is facing these days. Talk about that and about some long-term goals for City Council. I'm pleased to welcome back to the program John Best. John is the publisher of the Bay Observer and, of course, former news director at CHCH-TV for many years, too. John, good to have you back in the program. Thanks for joining us today.
Nice to be with you, Bill.
Let me circle back and talk about this whole idea about these trips, these trade excursions, as some people refer to them as. Mayor Horwath has announced that she'll be heading over there. The Rockamolto is one of Hamilton's twin cities, I guess. There's a bunch of those, and many communities do that now. But is there an economic benefit? I mean, is this a photo op? Is this something necessary that the city needs to be doing?
Well, I suppose these trips are never necessary, but when I read the story, the first question that popped into my mind is, who is her travel agent? If she can get 11 days flight and accommodation for $4,500 in Italy, come on! I mean, I couldn't believe it when I read that. So, we have this community has a very large Italian population, so I think there is more justification here than there might be elsewhere. But, she has a budget. Presumably there's some travel allowed. I can't think of a country that she could go to that would have more connection to Hamilton than someplace in Italy, particularly Sicily. So, the people that are crabbing about it are mostly people that backed another candidate for mayor. So I think you have to factor that in as well.
Well, and I guess, I don't know if this is a justification, but they all do it.
Yeah.
Previous mayors have all done this, and you may say, well, and it's not just Italy. I mean, they've gone to China and other places like this, and invariably what they've done in the past, I'm not quite sure what the itinerary is for Mayor Horwath. They usually have a few business folks tagging along who may have ties to those countries, I guess in the hopes of attracting some sort of economic development. And quite frankly, those mayors will tell you that it has had an economic benefit, that it has resulted in some sort of a commitment, maybe even investment into this community as well. And that's not a bad thing, is it?
No, and I think she does have, I think it's something like 30 or more people going with her. So, the other thing is, you've been at City Hall. It's, that job is a grind, and I'm sure dealing with this particular council is a challenge. Why should being a mayor be the only job in the world that doesn't have some kind of perks? And, I just think, we can get really small about this kind of stuff, but she's got a bunch of people going with her. Whether she comes back with an order book full, there's certainly going to be other people there that are going to make some useful contacts. And I just think it's much ado about nothing. God bless her. 11 days for $4,500. She's got to be sitting on the back seat of an Air Transat plane, and I didn't know they had days ins in Italy, but they must for those kind of prices. $4,500 for 11 days in Italy. I don't think I could do it, so I don't know how she's doing it, frankly.
Well, and I'm sure we'll get a report when she gets back with all the wonderful people she met, and as you say, some of those business ties being established too. Sometimes this is planting a seed, I guess, and hoping the tree grows at some point, which swings us around to City Council's ambitious goals for the next 3 years. I guess just about every city council does this at some point. They're setting their priorities. I mean, they all make promises to get elected. We understand that, but to have some common goals with the city council, they've come up with 3 major bullet points here. What's your assessment of what they're shooting for here?
Well, I think it's one of these situations where the exercise is almost more important than the result. I think it was a bit of a bonding exercise with this new council. An opportunity to work together. And I think that's why when you look at the goals, let's face it, they're fairly general, and there's not much in there that would come as a surprise to anybody that follows Hamilton's politics and the needs of the community. So, I think it was a worthwhile exercise. It seemed to irritate. It certainly irritated Fred Eisenberger, the former mayor, because I think the issue here was. Councils over the years have had these priority setting sessions, and when the mayor announced, that they had completed the process, she termed it as being the first council-driven exercise, and I think that was and that irritated Fred, and he tweeted out that we've been doing this every year since I was mayor. But I think the difference is, there is a difference, Bill, in that this exercise seemed to have less staff involvement. So it looked to me like council had basically found their own consultant to manage the process, and they went through these exercises, came up with the list. I think there's 21 deliverables. And I think the difference was, if you heard the mayor when they rolled it out last week at council, she said, "No, senior staff are here, and today they're in listening mode," which suggested to me that staff had a lot less to do with this set of priorities. I think in some cases in the past, staff almost drove the process. And in this case, it kind of looked like it was a very independent action by council. Now, whether that is entirely the case, I'm not sure, but there did seem to be that distinction, and I think that's what she was saying when she made the announcement. But it ruffled a few feathers.
Well, I know that when the city was amalgamated back in 2000, that city council went through, I think, 2 or 3 different sessions. I mean, this is not a new exercise. And this is staff-driven or council-driven. It doesn't much matter. I mean, and now we're getting into that old analogy of who's going to row and who's going to steer as the ship goes forward here. I mean, the job, of course, is the council's supposed to set the policies, and then staff are the ones who develop policies or develop action plans to make these things work. And sometimes those lines get pretty muddled, don't they?
They do, and when I looked at the list of, particularly when you drill down past the 3 key points and you get into the actual deliverables, there's going to be some costs associated with some of that stuff, and these are going to be costs that are not in the current budget, which was already, it was 7%. They got it down to 6%. There's going to be some costs involved here, and if council wants to take full credit for these initiatives, and it results in another big whacking tax increase, they'll own it, and staff might be well out of it, frankly. I saw some spending enclosed in those lines of text, and we're already struggling with a council that likes to walk on last-minute suggestions, all of which involve spending money that wasn't budgeted. So, and Andrea's talked about that. She's used the word discipline, I think, about 4 times in the meeting last week. So, you can sometimes you get what you wish for.
Well, and again, like I say, there's nothing outlandish here, and these are all pretty much okay. This is what they should be doing anyway. I mean, there's that argument to be made. They want to reduce the number of homeless people by 30% and open more spaces and shelters by the end of 2026. Like you say, the devil will be in the details. How are you going to do that? How much is it going to cost? And where are these people going to go? Are all questions to be determined later. And that's really where this thing, is going to get somewhat controversial, I would think. How is this going to happen? They want to have more homes built too. Well, are they physically going to build them? Are they going to fund this? Or are they going to try to encourage the private sector involved in that? Those are all details that need to be worked out.
Well, and if you reduce homelessness by 30%, it means you still got around 1,000 people who are either completely homeless, living in encampments, or couch surfing, staying with friends and relatives, suffering from housing uncertainty. So, some of the measures might be stretch goals. That one, I'm not sure that is. But it's, housing is our number one problem. And The one thing I noticed, and I wrote about this, is the number one priority. I think anybody would agree. The number one priority of this city for the last 10 or 12 years has been building an LRT. And it didn't even get mentioned, and yet it's going to suck up all the oxygen. It's going to have major impacts on street routing through the city. And, that priority list did not even have a mention of LRT, which is going to be the elephant in the room for God knows how long, if indeed it happens. And only a scant reference to transit, where they said, well, we'd like to get transit by 2026. We want to get transit back to where it was before the pandemic. So before the pandemic, it was carrying around 20 million passengers, and we were subsidizing to the tune of 50 million a year. So, that I would not say is a stretch target, unless, we know that transit ridership has not recovered. Even now, even a year after things have gotten back to some kind of normal, we still are suffering from transit cost and lack of ridership. So, I just really wonder where the priorities really are when, housing gets a line, pretty modest goal for homelessness and this transit thing, which is almost ignored.
Well, we'll see how it rolls out in the weeks ahead, I'm sure. John, as always, thanks so much for this. Appreciate the conversation today.
Good to be with you, Bill.
Take care. John Best from the Bay Observer.